The dry summer wind carried the sound of a distant train whistle across the plains as Olivia Keller's world shattered into 1,000 pieces. The letter trembled in her hands, the careful script blurring through her tears as she read it again, desperate to find some meaning beyond the cruel words that stared back at her. Her fiancé wasn't coming. After 2 years of promises, letters filled with dreams of their future together, and the farm they would build in Montana territory, Edward had chosen another woman, a banker's daughter from Boston with a substantial dowry. It was 1878, and at 23, Olivia found herself alone in Silver Creek, Wyoming, a dusty frontier town where she knew no one. She had sold everything she owned back in Pennsylvania to purchase the train ticket west, carrying only 2 trunks containing her modest possessions and the wedding dress she had sewn by candlelight through the winter months. The station master, a kindly older man named Mr. Jennings, watched with growing concern as Olivia paced the wooden platform, checking every arriving train for 3 straight days. Her blue calico dress had become wrinkled, her golden brown hair falling loose from its once neat arrangement. Dark circles formed beneath her eyes, which remained red and swollen from constant tears. "Miss Keller," Mr. Jennings approached gently on the 3rd afternoon, "perhaps I could help you find lodgings in town. Mrs. Miller runs a respectable boarding house for young ladies." "Thank you, but I'm certain there's been some mistake," Olivia insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "Edward will come," he promised. The station master sighed, knowing the truth of such promises. He'd seen too many young women abandoned over his 15 years manning this depot. The frontier was cruel that way men made promises they couldn't or wouldn't keep, leaving broken hearts scattered across the western territories like tumbleweeds. As the sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and gold, Olivia finally collapsed onto a bench. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs as she confronted the bitter reality: Edward wasn't coming. She had no money to return east, no connections here, and no prospects. Her family, what little remained of it after her parents' deaths, had warned her against this foolish venture. Pride had kept her from writing to them when Edward's letters grew infrequent, and now that same pride felt like a noose around her neck. The last train of the day pulled into the station, steam billowing across the platform. Olivia barely looked up, having memorized the schedule over 3 desperate days. This train wasn't from the east. It wouldn't carry Edward. Among the disembarking passengers was a tall figure who moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to reading both land and people. Victor Porter removed his worn Stetson as he stepped onto the platform, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and a face weathered by years under the open sky. At 30, he carried himself with the quiet assurance of someone who had faced the frontier's hardships and emerged stronger. Victor had come to Silver Creek on business, intending to purchase supplies before returning to his ranch 15 miles outside of town. But something about the young woman sitting alone caught his attention. Her isolation was palpable even amid the bustle of arriving passengers. Years of reading subtle signs across the prairie had honed his instincts, and something about her desperation called to him like a beacon. Approaching carefully, Victor noticed the tear-stained letter clutched in her trembling hands and the 2 large trunks beside her. The pieces fell into place: another abandoned bride, left to the mercy of frontier indifference. "Madam," he said softly, keeping a respectful distance. "Pardon my intrusion, but are you waiting for someone?" Olivia looked up, startled by the sudden address. She hastily wiped her tears with the back of her hand, embarrassed to be caught in such a state. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied automatically, Though everything about her belied those words, Victor nodded, not pressing further. Instead, he sat on the far end of the bench, setting his hat beside him. "I don't mean to disturb you. Just thought you might want someone to stand watch while you rest a moment. You look like you've been waiting a long while." His voice carried no judgment, just a quiet understanding that broke through Olivia's carefully maintained composure. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as the weight of the past 3 days crashed over her. "He's not coming," she whispered, the admission tearing from her throat. "I sold everything I had to come here, and he's not coming." Victor remained silent, allowing her the dignity of her grief. When her tears subsided, he spoke again, his voice low and steady. "You'll never wait again," he said, the words barely audible above the station's ambient noise. "Not like this, not left alone with no one to help." Olivia stared at him, surprised by both his perception and his promise. "You don't know me, sir. Why would you say such a thing?" "Because I recognize courage when I see it," he replied simply. "And because no one should be abandoned without options." Victor introduced himself properly then, explaining that he owned the Silver Pine Ranch where he raised horses and cattle. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Keller." "Olivia Keller," she supplied, her natural caution warring with desperate circumstances. "Miss Keller, I employ a housekeeper at my ranch, Mrs. Rivera. She's been looking for help since the ranch has grown. It would be honest work with fair pay, your own room, and most importantly, time to decide your next steps without pressure." Suspicion flared in Olivia's eyes. She had heard stories of women lured into compromising situations by seemingly helpful strangers. Victor recognized her wariness immediately. "Mrs. Rivera is a respectable widow who runs my household with an iron hand. I answer to her in domestic matters. You can meet her before deciding. The general store owner, Mr. Thompson, can vouch for my character, as can Reverend Walsh at the church." Olivia studied the man before her. His clothes, while dusty from travel, were of good quality. His manner was direct but respectful, maintaining a proper distance. Most convincingly, his eyes held no hint of deception, just a straightforward offer of assistance. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked, needing to understand his motivation. Victor's expression softened slightly. "My sister found herself in a similar situation 5 years ago. A kind family took her in when she had nowhere to turn. I'm simply passing on the favor." Something in his steady gaze convinced Olivia he was telling the truth. With few alternatives and night approaching, she made a decision that would alter the course of her life. "I would like to speak with Mrs. Rivera first," she stated firmly. Victor nodded, respecting her caution. "Of course. My wagon is outside. We can retrieve Mrs. Rivera from the mercantile where she's completing our supply orders, and you can speak with her privately." The walk to the mercantile was silent, Olivia's mind racing with possibilities and fears. Victor arranged for her trunks to be secured at the station until her decision was made, paying the storage fee without comment. Mrs. Rivera proved to be exactly as described, a formidable Mexican woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She assessed Olivia with a penetrating gaze before nodding approval. "You need feeding up," was her first pronouncement. "Too thin, but strong hands, good posture, you know housework." "Yes, madam," Olivia responded. "I managed my parents' home after my mother's illness and helped run our boarding house." Mrs. Rivera's expression softened slightly. "Good. Ranch is busy place. Many cowboys to feed, much laundry, cleaning. I teach you what you don't know." The older woman then turned to Victor. "You go. We talk woman to woman now." Victor tipped his hat and departed without protest, leaving Olivia alone with Mrs. Rivera, who proceeded to outline the position in detailed, practical terms. The work would be demanding, but the conditions fair. Most importantly, Mrs. Rivera made it clear that Victor Porter was a man of integrity who treated his employees with respect. "He is good man," she stated firmly. "Strict but fair, never improper with women, too busy with ranch to court properly but honorable. You be safe at Silver Pine." By evening, Olivia had made her decision. With her trunks loaded in Victor's wagon, they departed Silver Creek as the last light faded from the sky. The journey to Silver Pine Ranch passed mostly in silence, broken only by Victor's occasional comments about landmarks or neighboring properties. Olivia studied the landscape illuminated by moonlight, vast, open spaces unlike anything in Pennsylvania. Despite her heartbreak and uncertainty, something about the endless horizon stirred a sense of possibility within her. Here, perhaps, she could rebuild. Silver Pine Ranch emerged from the darkness, a substantial main house with several outbuildings and corrals spread across a valley nestled against pine-covered hills. Lamplight glowed from windows, creating a welcoming beacon after the dark journey. "Home," Victor said simply as they approached. The following weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and learning. Olivia threw herself into work, finding solace in the structured routine of ranch life. She discovered talents she hadn't known. She possessed an affinity for organization that brought order to the kitchen stores, a gentle touch with the orphaned lambs and calves that needed bottle feeding, and a natural authority that earned the respectful distance of the ranch hands. Victor remained a distant figure during this time, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark. When their paths crossed, he was unfailingly polite but reserved. Olivia observed him with growing interest, the way he listened carefully to his foreman's reports, his patience with green colts, his fair treatment of the Mexican and Chinese workers, whom other ranchers often mistreated. One evening in late August, nearly a month after her arrival, Olivia was returning from the chicken coop with a basket of eggs when she heard piano music drifting from the main house. Curious, she followed the sound to discover Victor playing a haunting melody on the instrument she had assumed was merely decorative in the rarely used formal parlor. She stood silently in the doorway, watching his strong hands move with surprising delicacy across the keys. When the piece concluded, she couldn't help but applaud softly. Victor turned, momentarily startled. "Miss Keller, I didn't realize I had an audience." "That was beautiful," she said sincerely. "Choppin', wasn't it?" Surprise flickered across his features. "You know classical music?" "My mother taught piano before her illness," Olivia explained. "Music filled our home once." Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, a recognition of shared appreciation that transcended their employer-employee relationship. "Would you play something?" he asked, gesturing to the bench. Olivia hesitated before setting down her basket and taking the seat he vacated. Her fingers trembled slightly as they touched the keys, rusty from disuse, but muscle memory soon took over. She played a Beethoven sonata her mother had loved, losing herself in the familiar patterns until the final notes faded. When she looked up, Victor's expression had transformed. The customary reserve had given way to genuine admiration. "The ranch has been missing that," he said softly. "Missing what?" "Beauty for its own sake," he replied. "Everything here serves a purpose, practical, necessary. But music reminds us there's more to life than just surviving." From that evening forward, a subtle shift occurred in their interactions. Victor began joining Olivia and Mrs. Rivera for supper occasionally, sharing stories of his journey west as a young man, his struggles to establish the ranch, and his hopes for its future. Olivia, in turn, spoke of her life in Pennsylvania, her parents' boarding house, and gradually, the circumstances that had brought her to Silver Creek. Edward wrote such beautiful letters. She confessed one evening as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky. He described the life we would build together with such conviction that I never questioned his intentions. Victor's jaw tightened at the mention of the man who had abandoned her. Some men find it easier to compose pretty words on paper than to live up to them in person. I was foolish to believe him, Olivia said, the shame of her naivety still raw. No, Victor countered firmly. Trust isn't foolishness, Miss Keller. The failing was his, not yours. As September ripened into October, Olivia found herself watching for Victor each evening, disappointed on the days his duties kept him away. They developed a routine of sharing music in the evening. Sometimes she played while he listened, sometimes the reverse. Occasionally, they played duets, their shoulders nearly touching on the narrow bench. Mrs. Rivera observed these developments with knowing eyes but maintained a discreet silence, though Olivia occasionally caught her smiling to herself as she kneaded bread or stirred stew. The first frost came early that year, painting the landscape in crystalline white that glittered under the morning sun. Olivia rose before dawn to help Mrs. Rivera prepare a hearty breakfast for the ranch hands who would be moving cattle to lower pastures. As she kneaded dough for biscuits, she hummed softly, unaware of Victor standing in the doorway watching her with undisguised admiration. "That's a cheerful tune for such an early hour," he commented, startling her. Olivia's cheeks flushed as she tucked a stray curl behind her ear. "The first frost always made my father happy. He claimed it cleared away summer's confusion and showed the world's true structure." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Victor said, pouring himself coffee. "He was," she agreed, the familiar pang of loss softened by fond memory. "He would have liked it here." "And you?" Victor asked, his tone casual though his eyes were intent. "Do you like it here, Olivia?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it warmed her more than the kitchen's blazing hearth. "I do," she answered honestly. "More than I expected to." That afternoon, a commotion in the yard drew Olivia from the laundry room. A rider was approaching at breakneck speed, his horse lathered with exertion. Victor emerged from the barn, meeting the rider as he dismounted. Though she couldn't hear their conversation, Olivia saw Victor's expression harden before he called orders to the nearby hands. Within minutes, men were mounting horses, checking firearms, and gathering supplies. Mrs. Rivera appeared at her side. "Rustlers," she explained grimly. "Third time this year. They take cattle from North Pasture." Anxiety clutched at Olivia's heart as she watched Victor check his rifle before mounting his stallion. He caught her gaze across the yard, tipped his hat in reassurance, then led his men at a gallop toward the northern boundary of the ranch. The following hours dragged interminably as Olivia attempted to focus on her duties. Every distant sound made her start, imagining gunshots or returning riders. Mrs. Rivera maintained a stoic demeanor, though her frequent glances toward the north betrayed her own concern. Darkness had fallen when they finally heard horses approaching. Olivia rushed to the porch, straining to see in the dim light of lanterns. The men returned in pairs and small groups, tired but largely unharmed. Her relief at seeing no serious injuries quickly gave way to renewed anxiety when Victor was not among them. "Where is Mr. Porter?" she asked the foreman, unable to disguise her worry. "Following the last of them with Thompson and Rodriguez," he replied. "Sent us back with the recovered cattle. Should be along soon." But as midnight approached with no sign of Victor or the other two men, Olivia's fear mounted. Mrs. Rivera finally insisted she try to rest, promising to wake her if there was news. Sleep proved impossible. Olivia lay fully dressed on her bed, listening for hoofbeats, until the first gray light of dawn crept through her window. Unable to bear the waiting any longer, she rose and made her way to the kitchen to start breakfast preparations. She was stoking the stove when she heard a single horse in the yard. Rushing to the door, she saw Victor dismounting slowly, exhaustion evident in every movement. His clothes were dust-covered, a bloodied bandage wrapped around his left arm. Without thinking, Olivia ran to him. "You're hurt." Victor looked up, surprise giving way to something warmer at the sight of her concern. "It's nothing serious. Bullet grazed me. Nothing serious." She echoed incredulously. "You've been bleeding half the night from what I can see. Come inside this instant." To the astonishment of the few hands already up and about, Victor obeyed without protest, allowing Olivia to guide him to the kitchen. Mrs. Rivera appeared as if summoned by some sixth sense, immediately gathering medical supplies while Olivia helped Victor remove his jacket and rolled up his sleeve to reveal the makeshift bandage beneath. "Thompson and Rodriguez?" she asked as she gently cleaned the wound. "Safe," he assured her. "They're taking the long way back, watching our boundary. The rustlers won't return, not after we track them to their camp." The wound, though painful, was indeed not life-threatening. As Olivia carefully wrapped fresh bandages around his arm, Victor watched her face, noting the way her brow furrowed in concentration and the gentle touch of her hands. "You were worried," he stated, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Olivia's hand stilled momentarily. "Of course I was worried. The entire ranch was concerned. But you waited up all night," he observed. "Your eyes give you away, Olivia." She met his gaze then, unable to deny the truth. "I couldn't bear not knowing if you were safe." Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing steadily since that first encounter at the train depot. Victor's hand moved to cover hers where it rested on his bandaged arm. "Thank you," he said simply. The following days brought a subtle transformation to their relationship. Victor sought out Olivia's company more deliberately, sharing meals with her and Mrs. Rivera regularly. They took to walking together in the evenings, discussing books from his surprisingly extensive library, or simply enjoying the spectacular sunset views from the ridge behind the main house. November arrived with biting winds that drove everyone indoors when work was done. On one such evening, as sleet tapped against the windows, Victor and Olivia sat in comfortable silence before the parlor fireplace, she with her mending and he reviewing accounts. "I received a letter today," Victor said suddenly, setting aside his ledger. Olivia looked up, curious. "From your sister?" "No, from Reverend Walsh in town." He hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "He mentioned a young man has been asking after you in Silver Creek, a Mr. Edward Hamilton." The needle stilled in Olivia's hand, her heart constricting painfully at the name. "Edward is in Silver Creek. Apparently he arrived last week," Victor confirmed, his expression carefully neutral. "Reverend Walsh thought I should inform you, given the circumstances of your arrival here." Olivia set her mending aside, her mind whirling with conflicting emotions. "What does he want after all this time?" "The Reverend didn't say," Victor replied. "Only that this Mr. Hamilton seems determined to find you." They sat in silence for several long moments, the crackling fire the only sound between them. "You wish to see him?" Victor finally asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Olivia considered carefully before answering. 3 months ago, I would have given anything to hear Edward explain himself. Now," she looked up, meeting Victor's gaze directly. "Now I find I have no interest in his explanations." Relief flickered briefly across Victor's features before he composed himself. "Nevertheless, you should decide how to respond. He may come looking here eventually." "Let him come," Olivia said with newfound confidence. "I have nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of. But neither do I have anything to say to a man who left me waiting for 3 days at a train depot with nowhere to turn." 2 days later, Olivia's resolution was tested when Mrs. Rivera announced a visitor had arrived. Edward Hamilton stood in the parlor, hat in hand, his city clothes notably out of place amid the rustic furnishings. He had lost weight since Olivia had last seen him 2 years prior, and a nervous quality had replaced his once confident demeanor. "Livy," he breathed upon seeing her taking a step forward. Olivia remained in the doorway, maintaining her distance. "Mr. Hamilton, this is unexpected." Edward flinched at the formality. "Please, Olivia, I've come all this way to explain." "There's nothing to explain," she replied evenly. "Your letter was quite clear about your new circumstances and engagement." "It was a terrible mistake," Edward insisted. "Catherine's father pressured me, threatened my position at the bank, but I couldn't go through with it. The wedding was called off." He moved closer, earnestness in his expression. "I came to Silver Creek as soon as I could arrange it, but you weren't there. It took weeks to discover your whereabouts." "And what did you imagine would happen when you found me?" Olivia asked, surprised by her own composure. "That I would welcome you with open arms after you abandoned me without resources in a strange town." "I had hoped you might at least hear me out," Edward replied, his confidence faltering. "We had plans, Olivia, dreams. I still love you." The words that once would have melted her heart now rang hollow. Olivia studied the man before her, handsome still, but with a fundamental weakness she had never noticed before. Or perhaps she had simply been too blinded by romantic notions to see clearly. "No, Edward," she said gently. "You loved the idea of me, an adoring wife who would follow you anywhere. But when faced with a difficult choice, you chose security over love. I don't blame you for that anymore, but neither can I build a life with someone I cannot trust." Edward's expression hardened. "It's him, isn't it? This rancher who's taken you in. The Reverend told me how you came to be here." Before Olivia could respond, Victor's voice came from behind her. "Miss Keller makes her own decisions, Mr. Hamilton. She owes you no explanations." Olivia turned to find Victor standing in the hallway, his presence reassuring without being intrusive. Edward looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. "I see how it is," he said bitterly. "You've replaced me rather quickly." "That's enough," Victor said quietly, a dangerous edge to his voice. "You've said your piece. Now I suggest you leave before you say something you'll regret." For a tense moment, Edward seemed ready to argue further. Then, with a defeated slump to his shoulders, he placed his hat back on his head. "I truly am sorry, Olivia. I hope someday you can forgive me." "I already have," she replied truthfully. "But forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the past." After Edward's departure, Olivia found herself trembling with the aftermath of emotions long suppressed. Victor guided her gently to a chair, pouring her a small glass of brandy from the cabinet. "You handled that with remarkable grace," he said, admiration evident in his voice. "I surprised myself," she admitted. 3 months ago, I was devastated by his rejection. Today, I realized I've outgrown the woman who waited at that depot." Victor knelt beside her chair, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. "Olivia, I've been wanting to speak to you about something important, but I've been hesitant, knowing your history." Her heart quickened at his proximity and the intensity of his gaze. "What is it?" "I find myself thinking of you constantly," he confessed. "Your strength, your kindness, your music, the way you've brought life back to this house." He took her hand carefully in his. "I don't want you to be my housekeeper anymore." Olivia's breath caught, uncertainty flashing across her face. "I want to court you properly," Victor continued quickly. "If you're willing, No obligations, no pressure. Simply the opportunity to discover if what I feel, what I hope we both feel, might grow into something lasting. Joy blossomed within Olivia's chest, sweeter for having been unexpected. "I would like that very much," she whispered. Their courtship unfolded gradually through the winter months, each day deepening their understanding of one another. Victor proved to be a thoughtful suitor, finding small ways to demonstrate his affection: wildflowers arranged in a vase on the piano, a new journal bound in soft leather, evening rides to view the spectacular winter sunset. Olivia continued her work alongside Mrs. Rivera, but now as a guest rather than an employee. The change in status brought a newfound confidence that radiated from her, noticed by everyone at the ranch. Mrs. Rivera watched their blossoming relationship with approving eyes, occasionally offering Olivia gentle advice drawn from her own long-ago marriage. As spring returned to the valley, bringing new calves and colts to the ranch, Victor proposed during a picnic beside the creek that gave the nearby town its name. His words were simple but heartfelt, free from the flowery promises Edward had made but failed to keep. "I can't promise life will always be easy," Victor said as they sat beneath a cottonwood tree. "Ranching has its hardships, but I can promise you'll never face those hardships alone. I'll be beside you through whatever comes, Olivia, if you'll have me." Olivia's answer came without hesitation, her heart full of a deeper, more steadfast love than she had ever known before. They married in late April, with wildflowers carpeting the meadows and new leaves unfurling on the cottonwoods. The ceremony took place at Silver Pine, with Reverend Walsh officiating. Mrs. Rivera wept openly, despite her previous claims that she never cried, while the ranch hands cheered enthusiastically for the boss and the woman who had earned their respect through her quiet strength and kindness. As they stood together greeting their guests afterward, Olivia caught sight of the train in the distance, its smoke trailing against the blue sky as it approached Silver Creek. The sight no longer brought pain or regret, only a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this place and this man. "What are you thinking?" Victor asked, noticing her gaze. Olivia smiled up at him, love evident in every feature. "I was thinking about promises kept and journeys that end exactly where they're supposed to, even when they take unexpected turns." Victor's arm tightened around her waist. "You know, when I saw you at that depot, I never imagined we'd be standing here like this." "Nor did I," Olivia admitted. "I was so lost that day." "Not lost," Victor corrected gently, "just waiting to find your way home." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the ranch in gold and crimson, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had indeed found home, not in a place, but in the love of a man who had whispered a promise he intended to keep for all their days to come.